since elections and outcome of the election is the best way to confer legitimacy to a political party, I think having a representative and having a fair electoral system is very significant for countries' democratic development. But I think it's also very essential for democratic consolidation. So that's why I think it's having a fair system is very important. It is it was highly acknowledged in Georgian society, but the very existing system Georgia had in the past 30 years was created for a newly independent state when Georgia was taking the first baby steps towards democratization, liberalization, and the westernization, if you will. And in the past 30 years, as Georgian society evolved and Georgian public became more politically matured, the existing system did not really meet the demands and the interests of Georgian society. And particularly the consolidation of political power under one-party rule in the form of a constitutional majority really created serious obstacles and embankments, I would say, on Georgia's path towards democratic consolidation. That's why during these years, Georgian public, Georgian civil society, and political parties actually demanded and pushed for electoral reforms. But interestingly, when these political parties ascended to power, they repeatedly actually failed to deliver on their promises of electoral reforms. And very often they lost political legitimacy and actually slapped political processes to the streets. I think this was a case with Shevardnadze's government. This was a case with the Saakashvili's government, and this was a case with the Georgian Dream Party. Because when Georgian Dream Party came to power in 2012, actually, this was the first time when real power transition happened through electoral means. One of the top priorities they had was to have these constitutional amendments and the electoral reforms. But it took them around at least like 5 years, I think, until they proposed such an amendment. And they did not do this for the cycle of 2020. They did for 2024 electoral cycles. And I think this creates kind of questions behind the intention of this amendment, because we know that once you have a constitutional majority, you can always reverse your decision. But we started seeing some changes to this regard in 2019, when we saw that Georgian Dream Party cracked down on peaceful protestants protesting Russian occupation and working with Russian lawmakers to the Georgian parliament. And after using, I think, the disproportional forces against these protesters, Georgian government had to make some concessions. And this concession was, I think, made, it seemed unattainable, to be honest with you, and the moving target for Georgian society. So we were kind of surprised when Bidzina Ivanichvili made such a statement about moving to transition to the proportional system. And his statement actually was backed by other statements and reassurances. For example, Georgia's American congressional delegation visiting Georgia following 1 month was actually reassured many times that Georgia was on the right path towards a proportional system. Even Georgian president made a statement of such nature actually at the US Assembly in September 2019. But when the time really came in November to take real steps towards the reform, Ivanichvili actually backed on its promise and reversed this decision. And it took for like 3-4 months, actually, this really caused a serious public outcry in Georgian society and widespread protests. Not only that, the Georgian Dream Party received a barrage of criticism and denouncements from Washington, D.C. and from the Brussels. And during this time, I think Georgian Dream really lost legitimacy. both externally and internally. And Bidzina Ivanishvili, particularly, and the leaders of the party, really became an increasingly unreliable partner to the West. So this kind of created some kind of spaces for Russian potential involvement, and that's what the Russians always do. But after American and European serious engagement, both parties came to understanding, and I agreed actually on phased transition to a proportional system. And last June, Georgian Parliament really adopted a new constitutional amendment and altered the electoral system. So also, I think an electoral system is not fully proportional as demanded by Georgian public and proposed by Ivanishvili in the first place. But I think it is still more democratic, more representative, and more open. And if it is vigorously implemented, I think it can increase parliamentary pluralism in the country. I think it can even the political playing field for the parties, and it can actually allow more representative representation in Georgian legislature. I think it also will create lots of opportunities for smaller countries. It will create opportunities for fair distribution of power, for the distribution of parliament in Georgian legislature. And this 1% threshold create good chance for the small parties to enter the government. I think this constitutional change also will increase parliament's role overall in political processes in Georgia, and it will strengthen its oversighting functions. But what I like about this change is that this will be the first time in Georgian history when political parties in the parliament will be forced to work together, to negotiate and to cooperate, to create, to form a new government. So this, I think, will be very good step towards Georgia's democratic consolidation. And overall, I think this insignificant change gives a chance to Georgian Dream Party to remedy the shortcomings of its elections it conducted 2018, which was actually recognized as free but not fair, and it was very dark side of this. But also it will give chance Georgian Dream Party to demonstrate its continued support to democracy in general, while retaining Georgia's reputation in the region as a standard democratic standard bearer. So this is, I think, very important. And I think overall, whether political authorities and the Georgian leaders will have will and desire to do so will be seen in the coming days and weeks after we have this election. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Mira. That was a great overview of what brought us to this point. I want to turn over to Elena and talk about where things stand now, who are the front runners, and what we should expect, what kind of an outcome we should expect from the election.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me on the panel and about this discussion, and thanks for fascinating overview of the electoral, legal problems related to the electoral reform, to Mira. So I will start by sort of summing up what's going on. I mean, 4 years ago, I had this a question about the Georgian dream, and I said they have two basically essential challenges that they face. And the first is the rule of law, and the second is to tackle economic inequality. You'd ask me how are things now. I would say if there are things, if some things have been done, I would say not much. So that makes, and also the constitutional reform, which is like 1% threshold to political parties, makes these elections the most sort of fascinating election in Georgia's recent history, because like smaller parties are allowed to compete with bigger ones, though I don't think they have equal financial means to do this, which is also very important in Georgian reality. So what is the issue that like the opposition has a lot of pointing to do toward the government, because basically, as I said, in terms of rule of law, things aren't very great. The appointment of judges was followed by multiple scandals last year, and then the sort of the governing party trying to explain the issue and saying that, hey, you know, these people who were considered to be bad judges during the UNM government have now sort of repented and they will now be good guys. And this was said by at the time, the Speaker of the Parliament. So you kind of see that they didn't have a political will to proceed. In terms of economic inequality, I have just numbers to say. Basically, the foreign direct investments in Georgia have fallen significantly. And in 2019, it was just $1.2 billion. This year, in 6 months, it's experiencing about 25% decline, which is $409 million. So it is the biggest drop in a decade in foreign direct investments. And according to the findings, I think they are produced by the National Statistical Department, basically, the number of taxpayers who earn more than 5,000 Georgian lari per month is 0.57%, 0.57%. And the number of people, which we would say is a middle class, is basically 0.21%, which means it's the people who earn 100,000 lari per year and more. So it's like 0.21%. Can you imagine a country which has a middle class which is less than 1%? So this doesn't speak good about the governing party. Now, what the situation is, according to the latest findings, I think they were published in July or maybe August, 79% of Georgia's population think that economy is a disaster and that economically the country is doing very bad. And 43% of the population, surveyed population, think that country is going backwards, not only economically, but in sort of other directions as well. So which sort of gives the loophole, the possibility to the opposition parties to compete and to offer something. But now what we see, like the agenda is mostly, I would say, conservative, because many parties are sort of not bold enough to ask to promote actual policies which could be unpopular among elderly population or among the conservative groups, more conservative groups. Also, sort of, I was looking into the data recently, and the GD itself, the Georgian Dream, is quite left-wing and trying to be a sort of parental state where they will finance everything, they will provide finance. They sort of don't have the project which could move Georgian economy forward, which is the problem. And I would say that not many opposition parties have the sort of agenda to say that, oh, we are going to do this, and we have like for example, 5-point plan, which could, the only party who presented the actual working economic plan was the new party, which is Lelo, founded by bankers. So they sort of calculated it better than like the other parties, and said that these are the finances available to Georgia, and this is the thing we can get into in like next 4 years. So otherwise, I would say it's mostly what I have, like when I sort of listened to political narrative on main channels, what there are two words which sort of go into, you hear all the time. It's the past and it's clean. So the past is dominating. Even one party, one opposition party, is called Strategy Armashenebeli, which is basically taking Georgia into like mentally into the 12th century, the 11th century, sorry, even 11th century. So what it is, why is that the past is so dominant? Like politicians are questioned about the past during the talk shows, and I sort of try to think about it, why this is happening. And my sort of take, my reading of the situation is that most of politicians, political actors who now fight for parliamentary seats in Georgia do not have anything tangible to offer in present and about future. So what they think they will feel more comfortable is if they talk about the past and glorify the past, which basically takes, I mean, the narrative is about non-real things. It's not a real issue what has happened 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or 800 years ago, right? It's about what is the situation today and what it should be. So clean, the second important word which I heard, I mean, I was hearing it again and again during these past weeks. I sort of follow it closely. And clean, so I think it's the issue of corruption. And so the politicians want to tell you all the time that they are clean. And it's also interesting, whereas the Georgian Dream says that Georgia is not a corrupt country at all. Whereas if you look into the state contracts and procurement, you can see that most of the tenders are won by the family members of the parliament, or some ministers, or some people who are very close to power. So which basically, even though if they deny it, the very word that they say they are clean means that they have the issue with the corruption per se. And that is that's what has to be thought about, sort of food for thought in this election. So why is it about past? Why is it about being clean? And actually, when we have disastrous economic figures like 0.21% of middle class, this will be a catastrophe for any political group in any country in the world, because that means your policies do not provide, they do not deliver, and your investment policy is just not working. It's just simply rubbish, what Brits would say. And yeah, that's sort of my overview of the situation, and I'm happy to answer the questions.
Thank you, Elena. You brought up so many important points. So I have a ton of questions for both of you, but let me make a few comments. One, I want to come back to you and ask you about how Lelo is doing, what you see as, you know, their prospects of getting a good amount of seats in parliament. Lelo is a very interesting case. It's almost like this combination of good news, right? Because we want pluralism in parliament, and we do want new faces in Georgian politics. And these are people who came from the private sector. but it is a result, their existence in a way is a result of a rather negative development. And it's this whole drama with the Anaklia deep sea port project. I wrote a rather long report with my colleague Max Hess for FPRI, so that's on our website. But I think it's very telling of how personalized and politicized the Georgian economy has become, especially under Ivanishvili's informal rule. So that's something that continues to alarm me. So maybe you could also talk about that a little bit when you talk about Lelo. I want to add one more thing in terms of economic decline. 25% decline in FDI. Again, we've seen that the case of Anaklia has been really bad for Georgia's reputation in the West. And we've seen American lawmakers accuse the Georgian government of essentially intimidating American investors. So there is that, but then we have a combination of the effects of COVID on top of that, especially in terms of a decline in remittances. So the poverty rates, I do not know what the Gini index is right now, but we are seeing this extreme rise in poverty in Georgia. In terms of the discourse, this discourse, Elena, that's what you do, sort of discourse analysis. I'm really glad you mentioned these two things. And I want to ask Miro this question as well. The politicians are talking about the role of the past. I mean, talk about making Georgia great again, right? We're not even going back 100 years. We're going back to sort of the beginning of the golden age, and then about, sort of being clean and non-corrupt. One thing is corruption, another thing is nepotism, right? And the Georgian politicians love to talk about how there's such low corruption in the country as of the recent couple of decades, but nepotism is rampant, right? That one is really easy to kind of prove. But this whole narrative about Georgia's greatness, these very conservative, old world remarks that we are hearing from the politicians. I'm just curious, where are the young people here? What do the young people want? I cannot imagine, 20-some-year-olds being all about, David the Builder and not being about, okay, look at the West, look where the future is, whether it's technological advancements or better job opportunities or just overall modernization in the country, right? Access to better educational and job opportunities. So I'm still missing that piece of the youth voice, and not just 20-some-year-olds, even the 30 and 40-some-year-olds. We're just not seeing as much political activity on that side. So maybe you could just, Mira and Elena, maybe you could share some of your observations with me on that. And then next we'll go into sort of security issues in Russia and things like that. But Elena, I'll turn to you first.
So shall I start with about Anaklia and Lelo? Lelo is sort of one of the most extraordinary parties which participate in these elections because they have been founded last year basically, and this is an organization established by bankers who said they don't like the government policies and they want to go to parliament and change them. So basically it was after the government cancelled one of the biggest and the most important economic projects in history of recent Georgia, like for the last 20 years, I would say, after the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, which was Anaklia deep sea port. And they said that there were American investors, Georgian investors, and I think the EBRD was participating as well, and a few other international banks. So, but the government was sort of, they were not excited about this project, I guess, from the very beginning. And at the first opportunity when they had to shut it down, they did. And despite the fact that they always publicize that they are very active in foreign policy, I would say that this government has been very slow in reacting and sort of facilitating foreign policy conversations. And I would even go further, and I would say that they have actually been working on the projects which were started during Shevardnadze and then Saakashvili tenure. They were sort of overtaking this project. They have not sort of come up with anything new, which would be like their brand in a way, and say that this is our foreign policy initiative, this is the line we want to follow. Because everything they sort of try to say that is their achievement is basically has started in 1999 or 2002 or 2007 or 2009. So nothing in after 2012. So that's the issue. And I think in terms of Lelo, they are sort of trying to communicate to their electorate that they are a new party, and the people who actually, they are the people who are not politicians and who have done something. They have created the sort of product of success. They know how to achieve success. They have created successful projects, including bank and other smaller companies in Georgia. So they are sort of positioned in a good position in a way that they should expect people who worry about economy to be their voters. About decline in FDI, I would say it is it has been going on for years, and it's just the government didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And I think this is the COVID crisis has also contributed to this, definitely. However, there haven't been like big projects which government could say that this is our project, let's find international investors, let's do this sort of thing, or we are legislating something which will change game, which could be a game changer and improve the situation in the country. So this is also one of the trajectories here. So why conservatives gain support and why the youth is not active? I think because the youth is sort of detached, and I think I read somewhere, I forgot where I read it, but I read it a few weeks ago that the youth is sort of disengaged and disappointed. So that's why the voting isn't their voting participation in elections isn't that high. So I think that has to change. You know, if you want to change, you have to vote, and we have seen how Barack Obama has been campaigning during the recent month. So go and vote if you want to change. And I think conservatism is exploiting fears, and that's where they are winning. So they are exploiting fears that someone will attack you, someone will take away your values, someone will take away your family, or what. It depends on group by group basis, but that's what they exploit, is fear. And people who fear for something, of course they are mostly conservative leaning. So, and I think that
Thank you.
Talk about security.
Thank you for addressing all those all those questions. Miro, I want to turn over to you because we cannot keep going without mentioning Russia's role. Also, we cannot talk about conservatism and fear mongering again, without talking about Russian disinformation. So can you tell us a little bit about where Russia stands in the pre-elections?
Sure. Thank you very much. It's a great question. But before we get there, I would like to add a couple of words to what just Elena said. I think Georgian youth are increasingly disillusioned with the government, and also with all the processes going on in Georgia, political processes. It's kind of like, it's a dark process, and all the politicians have been undermined in general. Their reputation is very down. So it's not cool to be in politics. And if you really observe, in the past 8 years since the Georgian Dream is in government, over several 100,000 Georgians left the country seeking job opportunities in Europe and the United States. So these are these young people, working age people, who really want to work and produce. So this is one of the actions we really don't see big engagement from the youth. But also there is a very light point I want to make. It's encouraging, I would say, in other words, that the electoral system change I just mentioned in my presentation actually was led by Georgian youth. They actually played a significant main role, not political parties, not all these establishment parties and the politicians, but the youth played significant role, and the government response was not to the politicians but to the youth. So that's a very significant point. I think that Georgian youth still can deliver. That they still can have a voice.
But who presents their voice now in going into the parliament? Who do you think these young people can vote for and know that their voice will be represented in parliament?
It's very, Georgian society is polarized. There's lots of propaganda going on here and there. So it's very difficult to see where they are going in general, but they are very pro-Western. They are pro-Western. I'm sure they are not for alliance of patriots or those Georgian, maybe even towards the Georgian Dream, because they are increasingly unpopular in their country. So I would say they can go more pro-Western because they've been outside the country. They know what's going on around. So they are very pro-Western. This is encouraging for me that Georgia has the future. So when it comes to the Russian interference, it is well known for everybody how they work in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, in Caucasus, in the United States. What they have done in Georgia, that they have conducted some cyber attacks against Georgian government and some private websites last year. It was very, very significant damage they did to the Georgian state and the private companies. But they also use disinformation. They actually use cyber infrastructure to sow discord, doubt, and dissension in Georgian society, and that they use also influence agents, and they support political parties. For example, this is kind of new to Georgian politics now, that we have some openly Russian political parties and politicians running for offices. We have Alliance of Patriots. That's a not new party. As a matter of fact, the investigative group dossier just disseminated some information about their Russian connections. Apparently, they are receiving lots of millions of dollars to conduct their political campaign and actually to create some cleavages within Georgian society. And they are giving them some political support and some advices how to aspire religious and ethnic conflicts in Georgia. So this was very, very, what I saw, this is as a threat of Georgian national security, for national security. I think Georgian government should pay more attention and start the criminal investigation, because funding of political parties from outside of the country, that's a criminal case. And unfortunately, I have not seen any tangible threat, tangible moves from Georgian government to address this particular challenge. Also, we saw that Georgian March and another ultra-nationalist group, and now it turned into political parties getting advice and support from from the Russian government. We saw that some Duma member of the Russian parliament was advising their leader and then was promising some help and support in exchange of helping Russian interests, serving Russian interests in Georgia. So this was very, very, a very significant point, and that it really deserved proper attention from the Georgian government. But as I said, we have not seen any serious move to this regard, and this is alarming. But also, they use, as I said, social media very well, and all these fake accounts. And for example, they try to undermine Georgian government's efforts in managing COVID crisis. So they were very big against this laboratory. We have American financed Lugar Center in Georgia, which actually played significant role in combating COVID-19. So this was the great help we received from America, and we used it very efficiently and very effectively. So that's the Russian really challenge. So these three factors I would single out. So that's this is not unique to Georgia, but that's what we have seen the past few months.
Right, and then there's, of course, you know, when we talk about why does the government not go after Russia more strictly, there are a few reasons for that, but one of them has got to be the very difficult security situation. Russia has occupied 20% of Georgian territory, as most of our audience members know. That's Abkhazia, South Ossetia, and we've seen quite a bit of movement on the administrative boundary lines over the summer, even the early fall, on the South Ossetia side. What we call creeping annexation, where we see Russian supposedly peacekeeping military forces moving the barbed wire so-called borders. But this is not the only security situation that probably keeps the Georgian leaders up at night. Now we have another frozen conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh that is certainly not frozen at the moment. Since September 27th, there has been active war going on in Nagorno-Karabakh. 2 failed attempts at a ceasefire, Moscow brokered ceasefire agreements. Now we have a 3rd ceasefire agreement. This time it was brokered by the United States after the foreign ministers of Armenia and Azerbaijan came to Washington, D.C. and met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo separately. So many of our audience members want to know this. I get this question all the time. Where does the Nagorno-Karabakh put Georgia? What are the implications of this war on Georgia? And while we are at it, maybe you could also tell me how you see this 3rd ceasefire agreement playing out. So Mira, let's start with you, and then I'll turn to Elena as well.
Yes, so thank you very much. It's a good question. Well, in general, I think this problem and this conflict actually created lots of uncertainty actually in the region, and this is not good for Georgia for many different reasons, because this is in Russia's interest to keep the region unstable, because if the region is stable, Western countries look at the region, not only Georgia. So when it's not stable, so we will have less investments, less Western business interest, and less engagement from the West. But also, what was very interesting I saw in the past few months, that we saw this total breakdown of multilateral international multilateral framework. Really, no one really came in and brought really this warring parties to the negotiation table. I mean, that's and this kind of emphasized that the region, this conflict is kind of getting regionalized in a sense. If we really see what statements Azerbaijan's president making, and and when we see the voices coming from Turkey, there is a serious attempt from the regional players to make kind of Astanization of the conflict, kind of to take out of this to international framework, multilateral framework, and to make this decision, to make this decision in the region, at the regional level. So I think this is not good for Georgia. And since Georgia is not a member of any security organization which could defend Georgia in possible uncertain possible war, so this is going to be very, very challenging for Georgia. And plus, Azerbaijan has Turkey, and Azerbaijan and Armenia is a part of this the CSTO, Russian-led security organization. They are more or less more secured, but Georgia feels very vulnerable, and without Western more engagement, Georgia will be in trouble. But I am very hopeful that with the American engagement is something we really hoped for, looked for, and I'm very hopeful that I saw President Trump's tweet, and so I think his engagement will make difference on the ground. So thank you.
Thank you, Eleni. I'll turn over to you. Do you think that this ceasefire agreement will make a difference?
I'm afraid not much, because we know that this ceasefire hold, it was about 45 minutes, and then it was violated again. It was longer than the previous two, but still it was violated. I think what could be the implications for Georgia is, in terms of elections, I don't think there will be any significant implications for electoral results now in Georgia, because mostly Armenian community in Georgia and Azerbaijanis as well, they usually vote for the governmental party. That's been for decades now. So I don't think there is going to be any change in that direction. In terms of wider security in the region, as I have said before, they think the problem is that the enmity between Armenia and Azerbaijan divides the region, and basically is a huge obstacle for further development. And the failure of, as Miro said, the failure of sort of multilateralism in this case and efforts is partly because the elites in the countries are more interested in this enmity than they are in amity. And the two bigger countries who sort of have stake in the conflict, and I mean Turkey and Russia, they are not very much interested in sort of sustainable development in a way, and in societal development in Armenia and Azerbaijan. Consequently, maybe Turkey is more sort of helping Azerbaijan, but the way Russia is helping Armenia, I wouldn't say it's a great help. So this is their goal, to keep this conflict ongoing, so that there is a point, a pressure point in the region, which you can trigger anytime you need it. Georgia could have been, I mean, because Georgia tries to build bilaterally good relations with both, strategic relations with Azerbaijan, because we are strategic partners, and very good relations with Armenia. Georgia tries to stay away from the Karabakh conflict, which I think from one perspective, it could be wise to do that. But from the other perspective, if things go worse, and we see that things are worsening, you have to have sort of plan B, right? And I think Georgia, in a way, can be not a mediator, but sort of a party which could bring some new word into dialogue, and at least make it a conversation between the two. Because now what I see from the developments and from the declarations on the both sides, there is no dialogue, there is no conversation, there is a monologue by two different leaders, and they make it for someone around them. They don't try to talk to each other. That's the problem. And I think if this continues, I don't see sort of solution to that problem, because in order to solve any conflict, you need to talk. And the dialogue has to be between the two parties. I mean, in that conflict, there are two parties. If there are three, there should be three. But that's what I'm saying, that they have to talk to each other, not to someone else, and issue statements which basically, again, there refer to the past, to some symbols, to courage, which, I mean, it doesn't give you a capital, I mean, economic capital, societal capital. It's mostly, yes, symbolic capital, but I don't think in the 21st century one should care about it so much. I think the human life is much more important than these discourses.
Thank you, Lynette. I'm going to turn back to sort of the domestic issues pre-election. I think many of us thought that the Georgian Dream Party had lost so much popularity that perhaps they would have to do way more coalition building to garner sort of a majority of the seats in parliament. But then the COVID crisis hit, and we saw that they handled it quite well. Georgia was sort of the green zone for the longest time, but this fall, you know, starting from sort of August, we've seen a rise in the COVID numbers. Maybe either of you could tell us sort of what prompted this, and where things are right now with COVID, and whether or not we are seeing a good enough response from the government at the moment, because every day we get, you know, we see in the news that daily COVID rates are now at, you know, 1,000 or so on average.
Almost 2,000.
Right. Do we think that the government is going to be able to handle the situation now that they have actual COVID numbers to deal with? Because until now, they really just had to sort of maintain the status quo as much as they could.
Sure. Shall I answer?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Just really, I think, again, there was some sort of early celebration and partly ignorance on the side of government. They handled the first 2 or 3 months very well, but then they sort of forgot to, they failed basically to conduct the communication campaign and to explain to people that the virus hasn't gone anywhere and you have to take precautionary measures. And they failed to build the sort of necessary infrastructure during these 3 months so that they were ready for the second wave. So I don't think that this sort of the government policy vis-a-vis COVID is a success. I don't think so. The fact that they've done something right in the first 2 months doesn't give them credit for the failures they have now. And basically the issue is that when it started in Batumi in late August, they failed to impose local lockdown, which could have actually contained the virus to sort of maybe a few hundred, and it was possible to hold this to contain the spread, but they didn't. So I don't think it's a success. I would say it's something, an attempt to succeed, but not a success.
Yeah, well, what I see the Georgian government is trying to avoid breakdown of economy. That's why they have been very cautious about making moves to a lockdown country again, because as we discussed before, the economic situation is very dire, and if they move and if you move toward the restrictions, so they may actually default in a way. So I mean, that's economy. It's related to the economic situation, but also we need to look at it from different perspective. Government really actually has taken advantage of this COVID-19 because the COVID-19 actually was the factor that helped the government recover its popularity, and we see now the high numbers in a way. In late 30s they are. So this COVID-19 and their successful management in a way, at least in the first phase, really helped them recover. And the second of all, they have taken they can take an advantage of the situation by implementing some social projects and trying to influence voters and enlarge pool of their supporters. So, I mean, I think to a certain extent, I don't know how politically right is to say that they really got some benefits from this politically, got some benefits from the COVID-19. But however, yeah, this is a serious challenge, and we don't know what's going to happen because, I mean, things are out of hand, and probably they are waiting for the election day, and then we will see what's going to happen because really situation is very unpredictable, and I don't know. This will be difficult.
Right.
So,
well, thank you both. We cannot finish this discussion without discussing the second largest party and the number one most popular opposition party in Georgia, and that's the United National Movement, still led by Misha Saakashvili, the former president of Georgia, who currently lives in Ukraine in exile. UNM has formally nominated Saakashvili as the prime minister of Georgia, saying if they get the parliamentary majority, Saakashvili will become prime minister, and that means he would return to Georgia. We're seeing a lot of activity from Saakashvili just yesterday at a very big rally, right? He did this huge address. I have my opinions, but I want to hear from the two of you. Is this healthy for UNM? Do you think that, you know, sticking with Saakashvili, holding on to him, staying so loyal to him, is this damaging or is this going to help them? How much popularity are we seeing for UNM in the current election? And then let's add to that, I would say maybe the third largest party, or perhaps, you know, a party that might get the third largest number of seats, and that's European Georgia, the group that splintered off from the UNM. This is a question that came in from one of our audience members, and something that I definitely am curious about as well. Elena, let's go to you first.
Thank you for the question. I think it's sort of a very complex question about Saakashvili. I would say that it wasn't a great move by the UNM to get back to Saakashvili and to make him as a leader, because legally Saakashvili can arrive to Georgia. That's there are legal impediments. And he is campaigning online. I understand most of people because of COVID campaign online, but he's not on the ground. And I think it also indicates my sort of point about the past, that UNM as well cannot find their place in sort of present and cannot create their brand, which is really new and genuinely new, because that will help them to say that, look, it's sort of a catharsis, if you like, that we know we've made mistakes and we sort of are ready to be new people. But now putting Saakashvili in the forefront as a front runner, they basically deny that they are now new people. They basically say that we are the same as we were in 2004 and 2007, and so that is, I think, an impediment, and it will cost votes. UNM, it will cost them votes. In terms of European Georgia, I know some people who are voting for them, but I don't think they will make a huge success because of their affiliation to the Saakashvili government, and also again their sort of program and what they offer often is based on mottos and sort of just nice words in a way. It's not that they cannot lure in the voters who are pro-European and pro-West. They will lure part of them, but not all of them. That's the issue. And also they have again this problem of being in the past, because most of people in the top 10 were members of the Saakashvili government. Not all of them, but most of them. So that is again pulling the electorate into the past. And I don't think it's a good strategy in a way for this election, because we have to remember that there is an informal leader in Georgia who has a huge purchasing power, more than any other party. So what they had to offer was something new to sort of outsmart his purchasing power. And as I say, I don't see that in the UNM and the European Georgia to be offering that.
Thank you, Elena. Mira, let's get your take on Saakashvili, popularity of UNM and European Georgia.
First of all, what I wanted to say about Saakashvili is that that's their strategy. Saakashvili still remains the strongest leader UNM has, and basically he's a regional leader. He's a political animal, so he actually he's a very efficient, whether you like it or not. He's a factor. UNM has lots of young leaders, very popular leaders. Popular, for example, Nikamelia is a very good leader. But if you really monitor closely, and if you go the suburbs and the villages and the districts out of Tbilisi, you will see that there is still a bilateral war there. There is a war between Misha and Ivanishvili. So even though small countries, small parties are doing well in terms of promoting themselves in the city, and people know everything about them, and they are, they go now. But in villages, and if, let's say, in the regions, there is still battle between this is a war between Ivanishvili and Saakashvili, and I think this was the rationale behind this decision. UNM made decision to, put him as a prime minister's, potential candidate. So, I think this was the rationale, and I think that's why they still remain the strongest political opposition party there. So, yeah.
Interesting. I'll be very interested to see how many seats the UNM will get this time, now that this is sort of the first time that the UNM has come out and said, no, Saakashvili will be the prime minister, right? Before, he has sort of campaigned alongside the UNM, from abroad, whether he was in Ukraine or Holland or even the US. So this idea, right, he's even bolder now about this idea that, we will get all the seats and I'm going to come back and I will be the prime minister. So I think that's something that's really, really worth paying attention to. I want to thank you both for joining me today. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we're going to continue this conversation. We have a few articles coming out covering the election in Georgia, and I hope you will both join me later in November to see where we are with the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, and also how the new Georgian parliament shapes up and what challenges it's going to have to face. This is not going to be an easy job. This is a very difficult time, not just globally, but particularly for the Black Sea Caucasus region. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank our audience members for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.